All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. We are here talking to June Ton. She is a debut novelist. Her novel, Jade Fire Gold, came out last October in the US. And it's really wonderful. I just finished it yesterday. So thank you so much, June, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi,
Of
everyone.
course.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so I guess we can get right to it.
Okay.
First, do you want to kind of give a little background on yourself? Tell us about yourself.
Um, it's always like, you feel prepared and then someone asks you to talk about yourself and you're like,
Right.
"Mm."
You're like, what do
So
I know?
yeah, like, I'm a person. But anyway, I am June Xiao Tan. My debut YA fantasy, Jade Fire Gold, came out 3 months ago in October. And I am a writer with a cat that is sleeping over there. And I grew up in Singapore, that's in Asia, and I moved to the US about a decade ago for grad school. And then I did film studies. I have a master's in film studies, and then, I worked. And not very interesting, I guess. And I live in the East Coast. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. So when did you begin to start writing?
I think like a lot of authors or writers, like I started when I was a child. Like I couldn't give you a specific age, but it's probably when I started getting into reading, like really, really into it. I always had a book in my hand when I was eating, when I was walking around the house. Like I didn't want to go out, I just wanted to read. So like probably about like 6 or 7. And then, when you're inspired, you want to create something. So like I was like copying the style of writing of the book I was reading and like writing little stories or like I guess very early fan fiction in that sense. I'm like, I didn't really like the ending when they like change it a little or like, oh, this character's cool, let me write a short story. I didn't really know what I was doing. And a lot of it was probably really bad. I haven't looked at it, since I did it. So yeah, long story short, I started pretty young, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Do you still hold on to those journals that you wrote in?
Some of them, or most of them, are in Singapore in my
Okay.
mom's apartment. So I haven't really like looked at them in a while. I should when the next time I go back. But I'm also kind of like,
Right.
is it gonna be cringy or is it gonna, am I gonna feel warm and nostalgic or am I gonna go like, no? Yeah.
Well, it's like that first brick in your journey, right? Like if you hadn't written those, like you probably wouldn't be where you are today.
True, true. Definitely
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
I started out the same way. I wrote bad fan fiction, and hopefully I write better fan fiction now, but you never know. So as you were writing, when did you realize that you wanted to publish a novel?
I don't think that there was a point in time where I was like, oh, I'm going to publish a novel because, like I said, I grew up in Singapore and like it's a pretty practical kind of like culture over there where, your Asian parent is like, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something like that. I was just, I'm just very bad at math. So I couldn't be like, I could have been an engineer, an accountant, or anything. And I really like the arts, like literature, you know, geography, philosophy, argumentative writing. So it's kind of like I skewed the other way. And I just never thought that I could publish a novel. And when I did other jobs as an adult, trying to be an adult, it just didn't cross my mind. Like, there was a long period of time where I didn't write a lot. I read, but I just didn't read because it just felt like, oh, it's just a hobby or it's just nothing. But I want to say like maybe we were in 2022, right? So
Yeah.
7 years ago,
Wow.
I was 7, 8 years ago, I kind of just thought like, I wanted to write something and I started with poetry, just scribbling things, out of a very stressful time in my life. And then I had the idea for Jade Fire Gold and a couple of other stories. So I started like writing again. And it was only when I wrote a lot more of Jade Fire Gold and I thought, oh, okay, maybe I should do something. And I didn't know anything about publishing. So I did what most people do now, which is Google.
Yep.
Like Googled everything. And I think what happened was I remember seeing somewhere that, oh, if you want to be a writer and make friends or find agents, go on Twitter. So I was like, okay. So I went on Twitter. I was like, oh my God, it's so big. I don't know anybody. And then I found out about something called DV Pit, which is a Twitter pitch contest for diverse authors and creators. And then I just pitched it. I think I pitched in 2016 when DV Pit, the first ever DV Pit.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Nothing came out of it. The book wasn't done. I was like, I don't know what this is. I am going to do it anyway. And then I tweeted, and then I saw, hey, it's a real thing. Like, people are getting agents out of this. I'm going to write my book and I'm going to try again. And I think that's how, that's probably the point in time where I was like, okay, I'm going to try to publish this. Yeah.
That's really cool. It sounds so organic. And I even think, like, even though you maybe didn't know anything at first, I still think 7 years is like a very fast path to publishing. So that's really impressive. So you talked a little bit about DV Pit, and I think you mentioned Pitch Wars. What would be your advice to someone who wants to get involved with Pitch Wars, DV Pit, and just kind of the writing community and Twitter in general?
I think they're all slightly different. So I will probably split it to Pitch Wars and Twitter plus Twitter pitch contests. I would say for Pitch Wars, definitely have a manuscript that's as polished as possible. Have your friends read it. They don't necessarily have to be writers themselves. They could just be readers, see whether they enjoy it, see if they feel like this part is not clear, the plot doesn't make sense, or that they weren't feeling a lot for the characters. Basically, just polish your manuscript as far as possible before you apply for Pitch Wars. For those who don't know, Pitch Wars is a mentoring program where authors who are either agented or published will pick from a pool of applicants and sort of mentor them through a few months of revising their book. And then there's an agent showcase after that, where agents, you kind of pitch to agents, and agents read your manuscript and decide if they want to sign you. And after DV Pit, that was what I did. And that's how I got my agent, and my first agent, in short. And basically just be very prepared. And because think of it as a job interview or an audition for, let's say, if you act or you sing, this is it's not your one chance, but it's your one chance in that moment, and you want to impress everybody. So you want to put out your best side, in this case, your best manuscript. So, make sure you don't make silly typos, all these things, because you want to give a good impression. And as for DV Pit and other pitch contests, basically participate, even if you're not ready for the next pitch contest. You can go online and you can just see what other people are doing, see the popular tweets, how are they structuring their pitch, what are the right hashtags. Go to the websites of these Twitter pitch contests and arm yourself with all the knowledge you can, because once again, you have one tweet or a couple of tweets on that day to make that impression, and you want to do your best to go in prepared. Don't be like me during the TV Pit, where I was just like, oh, I don't know what a pitch is. Let's just write this few sentences, and of course nothing happened. So just learn along the way and try to improve. And I think DV Pit, what they do have a pre-pitching thing. So I would also research, sometimes these organizations, they have a day where you can trial your tweets and your pitches, and people will come, the writing community or the book community will comment and say oh, this is great, or oh, this doesn't quite work, maybe you should do this. People are generally pretty helpful. And that brings me to the Twitter writing community. I think for anyone who is new to it, I would say be nice, be professional, be genuine, and also be careful. I want to say that, generally, it's a great community. People are very genuine and supportive and helpful. It's one way to make other writer friends if you don't know anybody in real life, and since most of us are trying to stay at home, or have to stay at home, or working from home, or not meeting as many people in real life as we want to at this present moment in 2022, like making writer friends online is it's great, you know, and Twitter is one way to do it. And when I say be nice and genuine is I would say like go in as if you're trying to make friends in real life. So, you know, you're being genuine. You're not going in to be like, this person looks really popular. I'm going to be their friend and I'm going to use them. And then when I become popular, I'm going to say bye and move on. Because like people spot social climbers really, really easily. And because the book community is so small, you know, you want to be professional and genuine about how you carry yourself online. Yeah.
I agree with all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Word travels fast.
Yeah, it's a really small industry and community. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see the great people really fast too. And you're like, oh wow,
Yeah.
like I want to be like them. I want to be inclusive like them. I want to compliment people like them.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling when you get to that point.
Mhm.
So how do you think the writing community has helped you become a better writer?
I think, well, if nothing else, it's a knowledge base, right? Like when you get to build friendships and relationships with people who know more than you, um, people are very generous with their knowledge, so you can ask questions. You know, I've never felt silly asking questions because like people have been so nice, and because of the friends that I made, you know, that's how I met my beta readers for my books. That's how I it's being a professional author, especially in the YA space, can be very lonely and very angsty, and you want to have your friends. So, and being a better writer is not just about improving your craft, but just being holistically, you know, more knowledgeable at industry because it's a business.
Right.
You know, so I would say the community has helped me with information sharing, with just emotional support, and you know when you need it, because writing is difficult. I'm sure like people watching know.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes you're trying to work out a scene and you're just like, oh, you know, I'm never gonna finish this, and then you talk to a friend in the writing community or your critique partners, and they boost you up. You know, they tell you it's just brainworms, you know, this is fine, stop it, you know, it's just imposter syndrome. So like I feel like all these are all the reasons and all the things that the writing community has helped me, yeah, through the years.
That's great. So I think you've touched on this a little bit before, but I want to get a little into more detail on it. Can you tell us about your path to getting your agent?
So after the first DV pit, the one we will never talk about again. I don't know if my tweets are still on Twitter. Maybe I
You
should
scroll back far enough, but that takes a long time.
Yeah. Nah. I took part in DV pit again, this time when the manuscript was ready. Oh, I thought it was ready. That was in 2017. I want to say maybe spring or something. And then I had like requests from agents. So I was so excited. I sent in my manuscripts. I was like, oh my God. At that point in time, it was still kind of like, you know, I'm just doing this. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's just try and see what happens, keeping an open mind. And, you know, the thought of being published was still kind of like, maybe it'll happen, but it probably won't happen, you know. And what happened was, that's why I say, you know, it's the most important thing is to get your manuscript as polished as possible. I thought it was polished, and maybe it could be published. I was so wrong. Because, you know, I didn't really have a lot of knowledge then on things. So even though I had like many full requests, I had many rejections. And I was like, oh. But then you kind of feel like, oh, you know, you passed your first hurdle. The first agent rejection, for me at least, and I know like some writers feel the same way, is instead of feeling really dejected, you feel kind of like, wow, I made progress. You know, I have earned a badge of honor. I have been rejected once. My very first time. After a while, it gets kind of like you feel bad, but the first time you kind of like you try to think of it in a positive way, you know. And what happened was I was like, okay, so the manuscript is not ready. So I reached out to a few other people. It's like, can you help me out? Can you read it? Can we exchange manuscripts and help each other improve? And then I revised it again. And that's when I heard about pitch wars. And I thought, I mean, what better way than to see if there is a published author who is willing to mentor me? And again, I didn't think that I would get picked, because I think there are quite a lot of applicants. So, and there are not as many mentors. So, like, some people try a couple of times. I was very fortunate to get picked. And then I went through a huge revision with my mentor. And then we did an agent showcase, and then I had a few agent offers after that, after they read the revised manuscript, and I picked one agent and went with it. Because again, you're like, okay, I guess this is what I do now, and you just, move to the next step and hope for the best. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Oh my gosh. So lots of twists and turns, but a very good outcome in the end. So let's see. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would you tell them?
I think it depends on what age my youngest writing self is.
You can choose the age.
I feel like if I were to tell like me in my late teens and early 20s, it's like, don't stop writing, just keep writing. Because that was when I kind of like stopped writing and kind of thought, okay, I'm never going to make a living out of this. I'm still not making a living out of this. Writing doesn't pay very well. But it's the idea of like, that path was closed. I need to do something practical. I would tell that self like, no, just keep on writing at the side. Just because you're not going to try it now doesn't mean you're not going to try it in the future, which was what happened. And I guess general advice to anyone and any of my younger selves would be, I got this from a TikTok. It's not writing advice, it's life advice. I wish I could credit the creator, but it was just like, I just saw it and then it left my For You page. But I remember the person saying that if you want to succeed in anything in life, you need to increase your rate of failure. So basically, I was like, oh, yeah, I wish I knew that. Basically, if you want to achieve something, you have to try, and trying means failing. I mean, hopefully you don't fail, but maybe you're going to fail 10 times before you're going to get to the next step. But if you never try, you're never going to get to the next step. So the whole point is keep trying, keep writing. Maybe this manuscript isn't going to get you an agent. Maybe the next one will. Maybe this book isn't going to get you published. Maybe the next one will. Maybe traditional publishing is not what you want to do. Go research self-publishing or indie publishing, So just keep trying and failing and learning from your failures so that you can move to the next step. Yeah.
I love that. You have such a positive outlook on writing. It's really nice to hear.
I'm glad, because most of the time I'm feeling pretty angsty, but I try to like pep myself up. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's great. It makes me want to go and like write this down. I have like a quote, that quotes that inspire me on my like whiteboard, and I want to like write that failure quote down.
That's a good quote. I should try to find like, that creative, but yeah.
I bet if you like searched it, or like sometimes they go on YouTube, right? It's probably on YouTube somewhere too. Yeah. If I see it, I'll tag them in the description to this video. Well, I think that segues us really well into kind of like the craft of writing piece that I wanted to get into. So can you tell us about your general writing process?
I laugh because every time someone asks me this, I like hang my head down and I go, it's very chaotic. I'm not sure if anyone can really learn from it, except that you can write any way. There is no one way. Don't be afraid. If you are writing on napkins, that is perfectly fine, as long as at the end of the day you have a scene. I don't have like a very strict writing process. Earlier it was because I was working full time, and then I felt really sick, so it was like difficult to juggle both. And then now I'm not. I mean, I'm a little sick, but not really sick. So I just try to do what I can, what I physically and mentally can do during the pandemic. And so I would say my writing process is in drips and drabs. And then, yeah, I am what is it called? Not pantser, plancer.
Plancer, yep.
Yeah, kind of like in between. I don't jump into something without having a pretty good understanding of the world and at least the protagonist, or maybe one or two side characters, but I don't always have a plot.
No
So I
plot,
kind
only vibes.
yeah, like it's like I know how it's gonna start, I know how it's gonna end. Everything inside is just vibes, and I'm just like, oh, we'll just try. And then I kind of like just jump into it after that, write like 20, 30,000 words, and then regret and go like, oh,
Correct.
vibes are not enough. Because it's always the murky middle where you're
Oh
like,
yeah.
you're trying to push the story to the end point. And if you don't know where the climax is, what the conflict, I mean, what the resolution is and things like that, it's very difficult. So that's when I do a little bit more hardcore plotting and planning. But I guess I don't remember who it was who said this, but I feel like the start of my writing process is always exploratory writing. So I'm discovering my characters. I am making sure I understand the world and how perhaps the magic system works if it's a fantasy book. So yeah, it's no routine, a little chaotic, but at some point I sit down and I get serious and get organized. Yeah.
So if it's like a nice little knotted ball, and then you get to play with that, and then at some point it becomes like a pretty braid or loose threads, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
So when you started publishing, did publishing your first book change the way you maybe thought about your writing process or will write in the future?
Definitely. I think being a published author affects, I want to say everyone, but I'm just going to say most because I don't want to like, make a blanket statement. I think a lot of authors go through this, for me at least, go through this like, oh my God, real live people are reading my book and my words. And then there is judgment, there are reviews. I try to avoid reading all reviews unless it's a trade review from an organization like Kirkus, and those I read because I'm like, okay, kind of want to see what they're saying. But the general reader, because books are so subjective, taste is subjective. You don't really want reviews, positive or negative, to affect you too much. I mean, I would say like at the start, I saw a couple of reviews because you get tagged in them, and that was fine because you kind of want to get a general sense of what people think. But then I found like at some point, I was starting to get affected by it. And I think like a lot of my author friends said the same, and they were like, June, stop it. Start, you know, even if you get tagged, just like the thing and move on, or like, oh, just don't look at it, so that you can sort of maintain this kind of like hermit space when you're writing, so that you're actually focused on the writing and not focused on any other voices from outside. Those voices can come later, like your critique partners, your beta readers, or your agents, or your editor. But for now, it's a lot of focus. So how it relates to so to answer your question, this long-winded answer, I think now I have to work really, really hard to focus when I'm writing. Because in the past, it was just like, oh, I have all the time in the world. I can just do this and do that and then delete it and then change it or whatever. It's fine. It's just for me, just for my friend. But now I'm like, oh my God, this is a job, you know. So I have to try really hard at the beginning to regain that joy in writing and exploring before the job part comes in. So yeah, the process is slightly different now.
That makes a lot of sense. And I really like what you said about waiting. And you kind of talked about the voices that you listen to are the trusted voices that you've chosen really to listen to, who have your best interest at heart, your writing best interest at heart, like your agents and beta readers and critique partners.
Yeah.
Awesome. So can you talk to us a little bit about, like, once you've written, and maybe you've kind of touched on this before, how do you edit what you write once it's kind of there on the page?
I think it for me, because I edit as I write, even though I'm a bit of a pantser, whenever I start a writing session, I kind of like look at the scene that I wrote the day before, the session before, just to get into the vibes of the story. And sometimes I see things I want to change, or like I want to improve the prose, and I do it. It's not the most efficient way of writing, because I think like if you write a fast and dirty draft, you're going to get to the end of the book faster. But I kind of like if the chapter before is not clean or not like doing what I wanted to do, I get very anxious. So I kind of have to like edit as I go. So yeah, I edit as I go.
Very
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, I usually do that too, but not during NaNoWriMo because that's just
Oh, yeah.
words
You
only.
don't have time.
Don't
Yeah.
have time. So how do you know once you've edited, how do you know once something is maybe done or ready to be beta read or critique partnered?
I don't know actually. I think it comes probably at the point in time where either I just need feedback and I'm like, okay, it's time to ask, a friend to read it to help critique it, or when my brain is just fried and I cannot think of a way to improve this part and I need a break. That's when I'm like, okay, it doesn't mean that it's super great or it's done and ready, but it's done and ready in the sense where I'm not at the point where I can make it any better for now. I need a break. So that's how I see it, as it's done for now. Yeah.
That's good. That sounds like kind of a refilling of your creative well without
Yes.
doing anything creatively.
Yeah.
So when you do, maybe something is written and you can't kind of push your way forward, but it's not quite ready for critique or review. Do you believe in what some call writer's block?
Yes and no.
Oh.
I believe in the block. I feel like the block is real. It kind of relates to what you just said about filling the creative well. If your well is empty, if your brain is so fried that you literally can't put the next word on the page, or you can't think of like a better way to write a sentence, or like figure out this plot twist or this plot hole or seal the plot hole, it might mean that you have an actual block where you need to take a step back or two steps back, go do something else, go live your life, go watch a movie, or go bake something, just do something else, relax a little, and then have your brain rest, and then it's ready again to start. So I believe there are blocks like that where perhaps you're close to burnout because you pushed yourself too hard. But I also think like some blocks is, for me at least, I'm just procrastinating. I'm just like, I don't really want to do it. I know this is going to be a difficult scene. So let me go pack my room. Let me go make a list of, other things to do. So that's not like a real block. It may feel like a block that, oh, I don't feel like I can write today. But if the reason isn't because your creative well is unfilled, but because you're just procrastinating, then it's not really a real block, I feel. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely. So for writing, as you're writing, how do you go about world building, especially in a fantasy novel like Jade Fire Gold?
I think like for me, a lot of what world building that I do starts with the concept and probably the protagonist. Because characters kind of like come to me first, and then I start building the magic system or the world around them. And it's I could write like essays on this, and I'm not like the best person at world building either. So like what I personally do would be to try to see the world from the protagonist's point of view, and also the side characters and the antagonists and so on. Because if I feel like if you want to make that world feel real to your reader, you first need to make it feel real to your characters. So it sounds very like hand wavy, like, what do you mean from the eyes of my characters? But kind of like just think like, for example, in Jade Fire Gold, one of the protagonists is a peasant girl, and she lives in poverty, she's an orphan, and the desert is creeping up and decimating her village. So she's going to see that part of the world and that part of the story very different from another character who perhaps grew up in a palace, didn't have to worry about his or her next meal and things like that. So that's how I feel you could get the world building to be real, is to have characters show readers their side of the story and their side of the world, and then when you piece it together, like things start to make sense. Yeah.
I can, yeah. As you were talking, I was definitely thinking about the dual POV that Jade Fire Gold has, and I see what you're talking about. You said it was just hand wavy, but I was like, no, this like concretely makes sense. I'm sure a lot of our watchers and listeners have read Jade Fire Gold and can see exactly what you're talking about through your character's dual points of view.
That's good. Yeah.
So do you think there's a difference between stories that you like to write versus stories that you like to read?
I don't know. Not well, I don't write contemporary as of now because I don't know how to plot contemporary without magic.
It's hard.
It's really hard. It's a skill, and I really admire like contemporary writers and like how do you or mystery writers. I don't read
Yes.
that many mysteries. I'm always like in awe, like how do you think or thrillers, how do you do this? How did you pace it this way? How did you think of all the plot twists? So in a way I read both books that I feel like I don't write or cannot write, don't have the skill set, and also books that I write, like because I love sci-fi and fantasy. I just like to jump into a world that someone else has created, that just leave our world for a while and try to discover new things. Yeah.
Very nice. Do you think like when you're reading the stuff that you don't write, do you feel like that's also like kind of building your knowledge base, like you were talking about with Twitter before and publishing?
Yeah, definitely. For sure. If nothing else, it's just to, pick up certain craft points, like, how perhaps how a thriller writer increases the tension on the page, how they reveal a twist. Because fantasy and sci-fi, which is what I generally write, have twists too. And I might not know like the best way or like the most effective way to reveal something because my knowledge of fantasy is this way and I read fantasy books and they tend to do it this way. But maybe I want to do something fresh. Maybe I want to see a different point of view. Reading a thriller, for example, I'll be like, oh, okay, maybe I can learn something from that. So definitely read widely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, now I'd love to get maybe a little more into detail on Jade Fire Gold. But first I want to talk about your Instagram because it's so fun to watch. You just like seem to be having so much fun. And I really love the way that you marketed Jade Fire Gold as kind of the release date grew closer. Can you talk to us for people who haven't maybe seen it about what you did?
Hi. Thank you. First of all, thanks, Maddie. I will confess that I didn't really know what I was doing in a way.
I love that.
I think I spent a lot of time earlier pre-debut, because I was a fall debut. So like at the start of like 2021, it's like technically my debut year, but then I had to wait like almost the entire year for it to have like
Oh
10 months. So it just felt good. So I just spent a lot of time like, seeing what other people were doing, seeing what my friends are doing. And then at the end of the day, like some really close author friends just told me, do what you enjoy. It's sort of part of your job of being an author to be on social media or be on Instagram and posting things, but you kind of need to like what you're doing too. Otherwise, it's kind of like, people can tell. So a lot of what I did was like, okay, I know I have to talk about my book, but what do I have to talk about? So because I made a map and I was like, okay, I want to talk about the world. So I did that. I posted the map. I talked about like the different, nations and countries and stuff like that. And then a lot of people tend to be curious about how an author came out with that inspiration of a book. And then I thought, okay, I like talking about that. That's fun too. I can show some of my research. I could show some of my inspirations. So I post about stuff like that. And of course, when you have the hard copy of your books, like everyone goes a little like, let's post my book a lot because
Oh
it's a
yeah.
real thing. So then you have the aesthetic stuff, which is fun. And I think like along the way, I made a post about like face casts for my characters because I think like a reader or someone just asked like, oh, how do they have you thought if Jade Fargo was made into a movie or something like that? Who would act in it? How would they look? And then I thought, oh, that's fun. So I was like, researching. And I was like, okay, I think it's this actor or this actress, and then I just posted something about it, and it was quite a popular post. So it's just a lot of it was organic and just me wanting to share certain parts of the book and how it came about, and also just I don't know, just trying to make it fun for myself too. Yeah.
I think that definitely like shines through for sure. Like it's very fun. So getting into the book itself, can you maybe give us a brief overview of what it's about?
Okay, so I have it on hand. The tagline is "Her Destiny, His Revenge," and basically, as Maddie has said, is a dual POV YA fantasy that is inspired by Chinese mythology, and it follows the two POVs. One of them is An. She is a peasant girl who's been cursed with dark magic, and the other POV is Altan, and he's an exiled prince whose entire family has been decimated by evil people, because this is a fantasy. And because it is a young adult fantasy, both of them eventually meet, and they have to reluctantly work together to achieve their goals. Altan basically wants to get the throne back, and avenge his family, because that's what you do in fantasy books. And An basically, I would say An wants to be left alone, but because she has this really, really powerful magic, a lot of people are after her. They want to use her, they want to kill her. So she's just running for her life and hoping that he can help her, stay alive. And also, her grandmother gets kidnapped by evil people. So she's also trying to save her grandmother. I don't know if I did a good job explaining, but yeah.
I've read it. I think I mentioned before, and it was such a ride. Oh my God, it was so fun to read and getting to know all of these characters that you've created. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your initial inspiration was for Jade Fire Gold, for folks who maybe haven't seen your posts on Instagram about it?
Basically a few things. I would say the very initial seed it's something really cheesy. I kind of had a dream. Yeah.
Great. Oh my gosh.
So I don't remember the dream, but I kind of woke up with this image of a girl who was standing in the desert, and she's just dressed in rags. I knew she was an orphan. She had a grandmother, and she was just trying to survive in a very harsh environment. And in my mind, the desert was like a beast that was eating up, all the villages and everywhere. And I didn't really think that much of it. It was just that the look on her face, which was very determined, kind of stuck in my mind. And this was sometime in December 2015. I remember because a few days later I watched Star Wars: The Force Awakens. And Rey was in the desert, dressed in rags, fighting for her life. And I was like, this is so strange. Maybe I should think about that image a little bit more. So I sat down and I thought, what do I work on? I was working on an urban fantasy previously, which was kind of a mess, and I was a bit stuck. And then when this image and this idea came, I was like, what do I actually want to write? And I thought back about the stories that I liked as a kid. And it turned out to be movies that I watched, Chinese martial art movies that were based on classic Chinese wuxia or sword fantasy novels, and that I watched with my cousins at my grandparents' house, during the summers and school vacations. And I was just like, I want to write a wuxia, xianxia kind of story. What can I do? And that's where I started building the world with all these elements from ancient Chinese culture and tropes from Chinese high fantasy. So that's how the initial inspiration came about. Yeah.
That's incredible. I love that it started with a dream. Oh my gosh.
It's so cheesy. Yeah.
But can you think, if you never had that dream, how different would your life be? Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. So while reading, one of my favorite things about Jade Fire Gold was just the unpredictability about the whole thing. Usually I kind of pride myself on oh, I can kind of guess what's coming next. I do read a lot of mystery and I'm I can figure out who it is. But I I was like, I don't know what's going to happen next. Like, I have to just like keep reading. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about how you keep a plot unpredictable like that?
I think, first of all, thank you. I'm sorry, but thank you. Like, sorry,
It was great. It was like a unpredictable in a great way. Like, it's what I want from a book.
This is like what an author wants to hear, because you're like, yes, you were excited enough to keep flipping the page, because that's
For
what we
sure.
want, right? I think to keep a plot unpredictable, or to keep, I guess another way to phrase that question would be to keep a reader interested in flipping the page to find out what's going to happen next. I would say generally it's kind of like you have to plan what the reader needs to know, when they need to know, and how they should find out. This will be spoiler free,
Okay.
but I'm going to use the book to like explain it, because I think if the audience has read it, they might, it might click better in their head. So basically in the, what example should I pick? Okay, a non-spoiler one. So it's not gonna sound very exciting, but you illustrate my point. So basically there are two POVs, and the two characters, the two protagonists don't know who each other is. They haven't met at the start of the book. But we know, we the reader, once you open Elton's first chapter, he's a prince. He's whining about his family. He's telling you everything about it. So you know exactly who he is. But when Anne, the other protagonist, meets him, she doesn't know. So in a way, the reader already knows. They knew it from that character, but they have no idea what the other important character knows and when she will find out. So that kind of keeps the tension and the unpredictableness, because you don't know when the author's going to like do the reveal, especially when it doesn't happen for a long time. Yeah. And then if other things start to crescendo at the back of your mind, I feel like if you're reading, really into the book, you'll be like, when's she going to tell her? When's she going to find out? Is she going to be pissed? Like things like that. So it adds to like the whole tension, I feel. And as for how the reader finds out, sometimes the reader finds out, through the POV of the character. Sometimes I think writers like to leave little clues, and if you pay enough attention, you kind of like pick it up, and then when a reveal happens, you're like, oh, I wasn't sure. And another way is to throw red herrings. So basically, is this person bad or good? Are they the antagonists or are they not? Like you kind of maybe have a character that is at odds with the protagonist, and maybe he or she is not nice to the protagonist, and you're like, oh, they're not nice to the hero, they have to be bad, but then they turn out to be good. So it's just playing with expectations. Same thing, like a character's brand new friend who's so nice could turn out to be the real villain. So it's like, turning things on its head. Yeah.
Very nice. I think that's dramatic irony. I'm like 80%. Yeah. Okay. I was like, that's a term, but I wasn't 100% sure. But yeah, you have such a mastery of dramatic irony, because I think it can also it can go really wrong too, because there could be like, oh, these two characters know, and it could be like frustrating that they don't know because they should know. But I think in Jade Fire Gold, there's no reason that the characters would know anything that we know. And I think that's one of the things that really propels it along, and it's very exciting. It makes it very exciting. So as we're talking about your characters and how you develop them, I would say that there's a large cast of characters in here. And another thing I really admired is just how unique they all were. I think quite often when you get introduced to a whole bunch of characters at once, it's really, really hard, both as a writer and as a reader, to kind of keep them separate and unique, and stand out quickly. Can you talk about maybe about the difficulty of writing such a large cast of characters, and maybe some of the things that allowed you to kind of help them stand out from one another?
I think I tend to write large ensemble casts because I grew up watching a lot of Chinese period dramas, and those things are like, your telenovas. They're like 50, 60 episodes.
Oh, wow.
You could have like 100 people in the cast.
Oh my
You know,
gosh.
like it just, and you kind of have to remember things. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm interested in writing, not to that extent. And what I found from watching all those dramas is what you need as an author is to know your character backstories really well. You know, even if they're like a random, okay, maybe not a random, but like, you know, a general that plays maybe like, you know, 5% um in the entirety of the book. He appears for 5%, but he propels something on. You know, you kind of need to have a sense of the backstory. Like, how did he come there? What's his personality going to be like? How does he speak? Is he gruff? Is he kind? Is he brutal? You know, how does it show in his face? How does it show in his mannerisms and his tone when he interacts with the other characters? And I guess the more minor the character is, the less backstory you have to know. But if they're going to play an important part, whether it's supporting the heroes or whether they're like a red herring side character, you know, you kind of, the more you know about the character, I think the easier it is to write a unique character, as you said. And it's also easier. It's still difficult, but it's easier if you know um, your characters really well, because then it sort of like informs how they interact with each other in a scene. You know, because if you have like three people in a scene, if you don't know two characters very well, you only know your hero or heroines very well. When they have a dialogue, sometimes it shows, because then you're gonna have like very plain or boring dialogue that sounds very monotonous from the other two side characters because you're focusing on your hero. But if you want to like beef up the other two side characters who may actually have a role to play, you know, you kind of want to know like how would they respond to something the hero says? Would they respond the same way, different way? I think a lot of the audience might have read Six of Crows.
Yeah.
So if you've read Six of Crows, or if you haven't read Six of Crows, because Lee Bardugo basically does a masterclass in how you make each character unique and how it informs the conversation, you know, in each scene. And as for me, for Jade Fire Gold, it was difficult in the sense that because it's a standalone and because it's a YA fantasy and because it's a debut, you kind of like, you can't write 200,000 words.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of have like a certain word limit you want to keep to. Your agent will tell you to do that, or your editor will tell you to do that. And there's only so many pages you have in the story. And I felt like it was difficult to give some of the side characters as much space as I wanted to. And, you know, I think like a few of the side characters could have been beefed up. Maybe you disagree, maybe readers disagree, which is great. But I personally, if I was given like, you know, 20,000 more words, I would have like, you know, added a little bit more for some of the side characters. So the difficulty was deciding what is the most important thing about or things about the side characters that I could keep that would propel the story forward and still give them, you know, a unique perspective and personality. Yeah.
Very nice.
So
This is a slightly unexpected question. But do you have a favorite character in Jade Fire Gold? Or are they all your children?
I do have a favorite. Well, they're all my children, so I would say like I have two favorite characters sort of. My favorite character is Tang Wei, who is the lesbian assassin. Like she's a reader favorite. She's amazing. She's sassy. It was refreshing to write her because she's just a strong female character that doesn't really care, does what she wants, you know, but yet, you know, she's good and she's kind and she's loyal and she's a great friend to Elton, the protagonist. But my favorite character is Lei Ye, who is a very minor character in a way, but I have so much backstory on it that unfortunately not all of it got to go in the story. But I really like him because you never quite know where he stands, and you kind of get like all these hints of what might be going underneath the surface of his very calm, very cold exterior, but you never quite see the full picture, which makes him really mysterious and intriguing to me, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. You're saying that he has a backstory, like more of a backstory. It got me really excited. Now I want to like know what it is. So this is my last question for you. What do you hope readers take away from Jade Fire Gold?
It sounds a little cheesy, but I mean, I just hope they have fun with it. There are some of the themes are a little dark or heavy, but I feel like I wanted to present it in such a way that was still humor and light and hope in the book. So I just hope that, people just feel entertained reading it, for a couple of hours or a day or two. And that's really the only thing you can expect from as an author, I feel. So someone to just read it and go like, that was cool. And then,
that was great.
Yeah.
I had a good time, and I really did have such a great time
Thank you.
reading this. And I hope everyone gets to pick it up and read it at some point soon. If you haven't already. Like I said, that was my last question for you. I had such a fun time talking to you today, June. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You. Thanks, Maddie.
Of course. I also want to thank Catherine, who's been sitting behind the scenes producing this for us. So thank you, Catherine. And of course, thank you to our monthly donors who have joined us today. We obviously wouldn't be doing this without your support. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful Monday and happy writing.